Hey! Often on the channel, we look at quite a few of the scariest villains of the Scooby-Doo franchise, and highlight what makes their original appearance, be it a TV episode or otherwise, so memorable to those who grew up with them or even found them later. And more often than not, really, these tend to be from the third TV incarnation, the Scooby-Doo show. Today, and in the next video, we'll be staying in that lane, but with some related ties that bind these even further. In the final level of the game in the 2001 Scooby film Cyber Chase, the gang faced some of their infamous past villains, like Where Are You's the Creeper, who I've given a whole video to, but most of the villains actually originate from the Scooby-Doo show, like the Gator Ghoul who I discussed in the Family Tree video. There's also the Jaguaro from Cheapers It's the Jaguaro, who right now I don't think I'll be talking about, but two of the others are quite memorable and iconic, and deserving of joining the ranks of the mightiest scariest villains arena. And since I will be diving into the Cyber Chase movie this year over on Patreon to finish my exclusive coverage of that era's history, I thought we might as well get back around to these icons before that. As such, we're diving into the third season of the Scooby-Doo show for both of these, starting today with Season 3, Episode 7. This is The Creepy Case of Old Iron Face, originally aired October 21st, 1978. A popular episode, this one has even made it to many a compilation DVD outside the season set and Where Are You complete series set. In 2014, it replaced an actual sports episode on 13 Spooky Tales, Field of Screams, a sports episode compilation where this episode is entirely misplaced, not having any sports. Also, the title is a reference to the film Field of Dreams. A year later, in 2015, the DVD set 13 Spooky Tales, Surf's Up Scooby-Doo also included it. Our villain today obviously is Old Iron Face, the title says it all, and this villain is somewhat of a reference to a French legend from the 17th or 18th century, that of the Man in the Iron Mask. Maybe you've heard of the Alexandre Dumas story from his Three Musketeers saga, or any adaptations of that. The Man in the Iron Mask, however, is thought to be a real unidentified prisoner arrested in 1669, and held for 34 years until he died, and his true name was never known. It's a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down, and it makes for a great basis to tell stories inspired by it, obviously, as Dumas would go on to do. The Scooby incarnation would be so memorable, however, that Cyber Chase would not be the only movie to reference him. The 2014 film Franken-Creepy, which I covered previously, recreates scenes from this episode and brings back the person under the mask to be part of the conspiracy of villains in that film. I won't spoil it further if you haven't seen it, but that's another with a lot of throwbacks. Anyway, let's get into this episode and see what Scooby did with its version of a man in an iron mask. This time, a villain seeking revenge. This episode opens up with the gang out water skiing, with everybody down to Scooby having some cute outfits on. Unfortunately, with the water getting choppy, Scoob gets tossed and tears off Shaggy's shirt, slinging them everywhere and pulling off an impressive stunt. They even switch when they get the hang of it, and it's a little surprising that even Velma is in a bikini for once. Things take a turn, however, when she points out a school of sharks, a man in an iron mask appearing to ride them as they get closer. Also,
it's a school of man-eating sharks.
So we are just assuming they are man-eating. Also, nice short shorts on Fred.
Jeepers! If that's a school, that must be the teacher!
They turn around to race off, and we see the sharks are also very clearly mechanical here. Old Iron Face heads for the boys, and one of the robo-sharks bites the skis, leaving them stranded in the water as he heads back around. Scoob tries to encourage Shaggy to move them faster, and the iron-faced man lets out an unnerving cry. Thankfully, the two do make it to shore, and the man on the sharks heads away, so the others head to join the boys. That night, they stop at Mama Mion's cafe by the harbor to regroup, Velma wondering if their tour guide Captain Morgan will know more about the man they saw when he returns from inspecting Skull Island, with the gang being some of the first to be getting a tour of the place. Firstly, Captain Morgan's name is a reference to the Welsh privateer and plantation owner Henry Morgan, who famously has a brand of rum you might have heard of named after him. The real deal, unrelated to the episode, wasn't exactly a good man, but you know. Second, Skull Island has somewhat been the location of a lot of Scooby episodes actually, and none are the same. Some of the most notable are probably Go Away Ghost Ship and Vampire Bats and Scaredy Cats. I've talked about both of those. According to Velma, this one used to be a prison for some of the country's most dangerous convicts, so kind of like Alcatraz. As of now, after being closed for years, Skull Island is being turned into a tourist attraction, also similar to Alcatraz, which itself opened for tours in 1973, 5 years prior to this episode, and would feature directly in an episode only 1 year after this one. And tonight, the captain is 2 hours late for his planned meeting with them. Meanwhile, this clam decides to take revenge on Scooby for salting it, and blows pepper in his face, causing Scoob to sneeze himself across the room, catching the photos on the wall that he knocks off in turn. Fred looks at one as he sees many are of a champion water skier, and Mama Mion herself walks out, saying it's her. When she hears they're waiting for Captain Morgan to go to Skull Island, she says nobody ever goes there because it's haunted. She adds that it's the spirit of old Iron Face, a pirate who was a prisoner there 100 years ago, which since this is 1978, that would make him from around 1878 or so. Fred asks why they called him that name, and she says the warden found him to be so mean that they welded an iron mask on his face to avoid looking at him. Obviously, the boys realize this is who chased them earlier, and she says they're lucky they survived. With it being so late, they decide to finally eat without the captain, and they're mostly satisfied with the delicious food Mama Mion made for them after.
Except she forgot the hot sauce for my ice cream.
Suddenly, they narrowly avoid being run over by this truck, which seems to be in a rush to unload food to the cafe, and seems to be a lot of inventory for such a small one. Not only that, the logo on the trucks and boxes seems to eerily resemble the all-seeing eye. They realize how really late it is and are worried enough about the captain to go look for him, which means a trip to Skull Island. Looking around though, there are no boats to be found, beyond this really unappealing thing, and the owner refuses to rent it out to them anyway. He introduces himself as Captain Flint, and he too warns them to stay away from Skull Island. The boys agree, but the others just pick them up and continue their search, finding a boat with a glass bottom. But someone watches from the shadows. They find Skull Island looking just as eerie as it sounds. I definitely would not have imagined pretty much a literal skull with a little prison on top of the head. Beautiful design work for the art though. They take in some of the view below with the floodlight as well, like these seahorses or a catfish. But the dogfish takes the cake. Something else catches Velma's eye, and she has them turn back around, finding a sunken boat that seems to be Neptune's world, which is Captain Morgan's boat, now with a torpedo hole. Now Velma is pretty certain Iron Face somehow has something to do with this. Fred decides to split them up, with the trio looking around the beach and the boys checking the prison, bribing the chickens with 3 Scooby snacks. Except this pelican swoops in to steal them. Hey, first come first serve. Also showing up is Captain Flint, up to who knows what. The boys check out the prison yard, asking if anyone is there, and the wind seems to answer no, as we take in this beautiful background art that really adds to the atmosphere of the moment. Old Iron Face seems to be spying from the watchtower, and the gate closes, locking the boys in with whatever is waiting. And that whatever shows up swiftly, as they look up and find the man in the iron mask himself. As the spirit waits for them, they rush the other way, and Shaggy falls down the well. I think we need Lassie more than Scooby right now, especially as Iron Face starts to pull him up. With the bucket stuck on his head, they run in the prison and lock 3 separate doors tight.
Like that ought to keep old Metal Puss out of here.
And yet, the spook pushes through and opens them with ease, dooming them. On their end, the trio search outside the island, and looking around the dock, the area should be abandoned, yet Velma finds fresh grease on the electromagnetic crane. Fred also finds it to be in great working order inside, with enough power to unload an entire ship's cargo. And while Daphne rightly wonders why this would be at an otherwise abandoned island, I love the tiny little blobs representing them visually down here. While they continue their search for the captain, back on the island, the boys are being chased. The proportions are crazy too. First, Iron Face suddenly looks tiny, and then the walls of this prison look way more massive now, making Iron Face look even smaller. Anyway, the boys toss on guard disguises and get the spirit to fall in line, then trick him into jumping jacks as they jump away. Back outside at the dock, the trio find metal cargo containers inside this building, and the logo is the same one we saw at Mama Mion's. And inside seems to be a lot of expensive food, like caviar, Danish pastries, fancy fruit, Egyptian dates, imported cheese, and Turkish coffee. And clearly the crane outside was being used for unloading these metal cargo containers. Back inside, the boys run in the kitchen, and while Shaggy says to be quiet, Scoob, as he often does, makes as much noise as possible, and their best efforts to stop the pots from clanking are already too late. Outside, the trio find what seems to be some kind of passageway, and there are fresh footprints leading inside, so they choose to follow. The boys on their end find themselves back in the yard and hide in a barrel, while Iron Face looks to the watchtower and heads up to use the light, flashing it around. For some reason, Scooby can't help himself and does shadow puppets that give them away. They run off again and aren't there when Iron Face looks inside the barrel, only a hole in the ground left, while the others follow the steps below. They come upon a door, and the way the shadows pop up from the light inside when they open it is really kind of off-putting, but it's still an admirable effect. Inside the room, they find a place fit for a king, an entire mansion hidden down here on a deserted former prison island. As they find a bedroom, love Velma's mouth moving but Daphne's voice coming out of her here, but whoever's talking, she's right. The place is a mess, just trashed. so someone is clearly living here, and currently as well, they find today's newspaper on the messy floor. In the next room, they find a kitchen big enough to serve a restaurant, even the refrigerator being fully stocked up with fresh food. Obviously, again, the food on the dock is for all this, but who is eating it and why here? They suddenly hear an eerie moaning coming from the vent, so they head down and find a large hole, the moaning getting louder now. Daphne then sees something in the hole, and they find poor Captain Morgan, tied up and gagged down inside, so they try to find a rope to save him. Out in the yard, the boys run from their hole and spot a ladder conveniently waiting, so they race up as the Iron Man also catches up, then tear to pieces as he follows. Using the remains of the ladder as stilts, things seem to finally be going the way of the chickens. That is until they start getting shorter as Iron Face chops the stilts down bit by bit. The boys fall gracefully this way and down a chute, landing in a pile of laundry.
Whoever lives here has so many shirts he has to put numbers on them.
Somehow, don't ask me, Iron Face already climbed all the way up and is now climbing down into the room with them. While they run off, the trio asks Captain Morgan about what happened. All he knows is he's been stuck down here for hours after he beached his boat, looked around, and someone jumped him from behind. But obviously someone didn't want him to see something, so it's time to find the boys and finish this. Speaking of, they head into what's labeled the torpedo room and come upon these robo-sharks, realizing they actually are the torpedoes, just painted to look like that. Hearing the ghost catching up, they decide to hide inside one of the sharks, which immediately sets off and is loaded. The boys shoot out and find themselves in action on the water, and it's a good thing the torpedo for some reason yet to be known has a steering wheel, because Iron Face is riding his own sharks after them. The others see it all from the dock, and as they pass under it and turn around, the boys are now chasing the ghost instead. As everyone watches them head back, Fred gets an idea. So as they rush in, Fred operates the crane and lets the boys pass, lowering the magnet so it grabs Iron Face by the Iron Face. With them all washed up, it's time to unmask the spirit of the man, but it turns out to be no man at all. Rather, it's Mama Mion. As Fred explains it, her cafe was just a cover for her real business, as in reality, she was smuggling convicts in and out of her fancy hideaway from under the prison using the torpedoes. And while the prisoners would shoot off as sharks, explaining the steering wheel, Mama Mion would use her skill as a water skiing champion to become Iron Face and scare anyone away. Daphne seems to have lost her mouth. We shouldn't be silencing women like that. Thelma adds that this plan was ruined when Captain Morgan planned to turn the island into a tourist destination. Her high-paying guests panicked and asked to be taken back, which is why the place was in such disarray. Honestly, I don't fully understand it all, but alright. Captain Flint congratulates them and then reveals that he's actually Federal Agent Hargrove in disguise, having been working on this case for months. The gang happily leave the island with the job done, but they realize Scooby is missing. Looking back, he's doing his best Iron Face moves and riding the sharks, but he almost crashes into the boat and has to fall back to save it. Unable to see him in the water, they look under the boat and find him peeking in for a final surprise. And that's the creepy case of Old Iron Face. There really is something eerie about old abandoned prisons. There's a reason that Scooby would return to the real Alcatraz just 1 year later alongside Scrappy in the next series, and a reason that Alcatraz is widely considered to be so haunted. Between these two episodes so close together, I would say the villains themselves are somewhat tied in terms of how iconic or memorable they are in a lot of ways. But this episode definitely has the overall superiority, even without the real prison. The beautiful artistry put into the backgrounds really does a solid job at making this a haunting location to have to investigate, and little moments like with the wind add to the feeling. Iron Face himself also is intimidating and pulls you in with curiosity as well. Pulling from mythos of the man in the iron mask from legend, and turning him into a deviant prisoner to fear, unable to see his full face and determine what he's thinking, adds a lot to his fear factor. Him turning out to be Mama Mion is also a pretty good twist. Captain Morgan is missing, but for all we know up until he's found, he could have faked his disappearance and be behind this. Likewise, Captain Flint serves as a solid main red herring since he warns them not to go to the island, and then seems to follow. Being an undercover officer is fairly standard for his twist, but he plays his part here. It's not every day though that we introduce a woman who in theory could be behind it, but the villain is a big scary man, so it probably can't be her. But toss on some extra padding and a design that conveniently doesn't show the face, and you can pull off anything. It's no wonder Iron Face is pulled as a memorable foe Bo in Cyber Chase, and that Mama Mion would return in Frankencreepy as a villain again, but now as herself. If anything, Cyber Chase is where I first met this villain as a kid, and why he remains so memorable to me. For this one, I do find the actual plan and scheme a little confusing. I watched it back multiple times just to make sure I was understanding. For one, I definitely don't understand how she came into this scheme, chose the island, figured all this out, and built such a luxurious hideout inside the island. Where did the money to start it come from? How did she get in contact with the prisoners to do this? The prison itself seems like it's been abandoned far longer than she's been here, obviously, so they can't be from here. How are they breaking out of where they came from? How do they get in contact with her, and where are they getting the money to pay her for all this? What relation does she have to these prisoners that motivates her to put her own life and future in jeopardy for this scheme? What even fully is she getting out of it beyond, I assume, pocketing some of the money for herself? I could go on, but the point is I don't really understand the motivations of our villain, even after hearing them. But really, who cares if a Scooby villain makes all that much sense when the mask comes off? I think we really just care about the villain with the mask on and if that legend makes sense in the moment. And it does here for the most part. This is otherwise a fairly standard episode with a good amount of clues like the photo of her skiing or the messy rooms and so on. The gang even have a good plausible reason for being here, at least in contrast to some episodes. I'd say this overall is one of the more competent adventures, excusing any shenanigans from the boys of course. The next episode we are looking at should be interesting as well, continuing to prepare us for the harrowing weight of having to talk about Cyber Chase, so hopefully you'll stick around for that one. Like this video and subscribe so you don't miss it. I have other videos on many things, like another episode of this show just before this one, and all kinds of other stuff. If you want to support the channel directly, the Patreon is now live. The Zombie Island and Witch's Ghost videos are exclusive over there, along with a video on Clue Club episode 2 and more to come, plus other various things. I suppose I'll see you fairly soon for another one of these, so until then, bye!